Chris Daly and Ralph Nielsen here from Primary Intelligence. We're going to talk about setting up a win-loss program that works. A very exciting program for us to be able to present today. If you've not attended one of our webinars before, we really do encourage you to take advantage of the question and answer box that is in your GoToMeeting toolbox. It should be probably on the right side of your screen toward the bottom. The idea is that we want you to be able to see opportunities to interact with us, to be able to work with us, to give us an idea of what you're thinking, which direction you're going. If you're able to use that question and answer box, you can let us know if there's something we need to dive into more deeply. And actually, to give you a little example of how valuable that box is, most of today's webinar was inspired by questions that we've received by our attendees over the past year. We get some recurring questions that have been very insightful to us and shown us that there's learning that needs to be given to the general audience. So we've taken many of those questions and tried to address those head-on today in this webinar. To give you a little bit of an introduction, if you're not familiar with Primary Intelligence, over 10 years helping companies sell more with intelligence, we use win-loss, account retention, competitive intelligence, reviews, target prospecting before the sale, market needs. Anyway, there are a ton of tools that we have to offer, and all of them are geared toward helping your sales and marketing department understand the market better, create value statements better, perform better, and beat the competition. I'm Chris Daly, in charge of marketing and also an intelligence consultant for our company, and I'd like to introduce Ralph Nielsen. Ralph, say hello.
Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Ralph Nielsen, Director of Research Operations at Primary Intelligence. I've been with the company for about 6 years now, and I watch over our operations team.
Fantastic. We're very lucky to have him. He's usually very busy keeping the accounts watched and the projects moving along, and the background that Ralph has and the experience he has under his belt makes him an invaluable resource today for this program. Today we are going to present our webinar in two sections. The first part will be best practices for establishing win-loss programs. Here Ralph is going to talk us through so many different ideas. In fact, if you've got a pen, you can take notes, although I'll tell you that the webinar will be available for download after this presentation. It will be available tomorrow, and you'll receive a link telling you where that will be. But he's going to go through best practices, what to expect, unexpected benefits that you might receive, and how to make sure you overcome the obstacles that are inherent in a good win-loss program. The second part of our webinar will be based on interviews that I have done with many of our clients, trying to understand how they use win-loss in their company, and in fact finding some very interesting secrets that may not have occurred to me had I not done this. These are ideas that will help you to take your information in different directions and provide value to your company in ways that you might not have expected either. Before we get too far into that, let's go ahead and ask one more poll question to our group. When it comes to win-loss analysis, go ahead and read the options and select all that apply, please. We just kind of want to find out where you are in the win-loss cycle. And again, if you'll participate in just the next couple of seconds, this will give us a little bit of an idea of how to target some of our thoughts, what kind of experience most of our participants have, and what can we do to be of most benefit to you in this presentation. We'll just leave that open a few seconds more. I will tell you something that is very important to me, just to kind of set the stage, is as we go through this presentation, you may hear us refer to things as what we do for our clients or our experience working with other companies. But I want to assure you that not only is this good information if you choose to work with Primary Intelligence, we've also tried to be very clear in helping companies understand how they can take this information and use it internally should they decide not to go with a third party. Or, if you do decide to go with a third party, what are some of the things you might evaluate a couple of companies against each other to decide who can provide you the best results. A couple seconds more on the poll. Looks like, if I show the results, looks like many people, we interview our sales reps to find out what's happening. Over half of our companies say that that's where they are in their process. 23% say their win-loss information comes from prospects. Win-loss analysis has changed the way we do business, 20%. I think that's fairly significant, Ralph. And this is a group that knows what it is and in many cases have been able to make business change on that information. All right, thanks very much. Right now I'm going to step aside for a second. I'm going to turn the time over to Ralph. Ralph has some ideas that he wants to talk about, especially on the first part, the part about benefits and best practice and these sorts of things. So have your pencils ready. I think you'll find this to be very important.
Thanks, Chris. I'd like to focus on three primary areas. Talk a little bit first about the benefits of win-loss and how it can benefit your organization. Talk a little bit about the obstacles that we've seen with our clients in the past and give you some ways of helping you in overcoming those obstacles. And then third, talk a little bit about best practices and what our clients are doing that we found that's been helpful. First, I'd like to, with our win-loss program, we in many ways we're focusing on providing strategic information as well as tactical insight. In our win-loss programs, we're providing individual profiles of each interview that we're completing, of each deal that happened, that will provide insight into what happened within the account, give you some analysis of what we thought of the deal, give you a little bit of an overview of the company. And then also we provide a trend report when we have enough data to be able to aggregate that data and really start to see some signs of what's going on. First, we really want to focus on helping the executive leadership team make strategic decisions for your organization. And one of the ways that we do that is through our predictive model. And in many ways, we want to make recommendations based on derived importance rather than stated importance. In the past, we've made before we had our predictive model, we used to work solely with stated importance, and that can get a little bit dangerous because there's a couple shortcomings with that. One, many times, a respondent may state an attribute as important, but because he thinks or he or she thinks it's accepted as within the industry to place importance on that. Two, many respondents, they can't differentiate the importance of most attributes. Everything's important to them, and it really gets difficult to really have a good understanding of what truly is important. And then third, using stated importance really doesn't provide the ability to predict the increase or decrease of the sales win ratio.
Kind of funny right there, Ralph. I think to bring that to light is we used to ask a question, how important is this on a scale of 1 to 10? And we'd ask that about 20 or 30 different items, and everybody would say everything was important. This is the problem of the stated importance is, how do you differentiate something that's a 9 versus a 10? Nobody will ever tell you that professionalism or features functionality was a 3 or a 4 in the deal, right?
Exactly right. Everything's important. You have everything averaging around 9 points, and then you have nothing to go off of. And so Primary Intelligence has created a proprietary statistical model that uses a little bit of linear regression and that uses the data from the research to come up with the derived importance. And so, Primary Intelligence really takes measurements of all the key influencers that affect the sales outcome, and our analysis is able to determine when superior performance of an influencer has a strong correlation with wins, and when poor performance of an influencer has a strong correlation with losses. And so when we come down to it, Primary Intelligence has the rare ability to pinpoint the influencers that potentially have the greatest impact on improving your company's win ratio. So when you can pinpoint specific criteria that you should focus on, where that will help you win more deals, and then it will come back and tell you how much you can win if you can improve in that area. That becomes very important to our clients.
Okay. On the second point, tactical insight. Tell us a little bit about that.
Tactical insight, within the opportunity profiles, it provides a lot of information for the sales reps and the sales managers to be able to have a better understanding of what really went down in the deal. Also, within our trend reports, we provide gap analysis, which will look at the average ratings for our clients versus the average ratings of their competitors. And you can start to see where our clients' strengths and weaknesses are, where their competitors' strengths and weaknesses are, and where the biggest gap is, and where they need to improve in order to compete against X competitor or Y competitor. And it really helps them to make immediate decisions on areas that they need to improve in.
Well, it's always fun in a win-loss analysis to be able to see what a competitor is doing over and over again to hurt themselves. Not because you want anything bad to happen to other people and companies, but gee, your survival is based on winning business from them. So if you can hand that to your sales reps and say, look, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, straight from the horse's mouth, that's extremely valuable.
Very powerful.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much. Right now, I'm going to step aside for a second. I'm going to turn the time over to Ralph. Ralph has some ideas that he wants to talk about, especially on the first part, the part about benefits and best practice and these sorts of things. So have your pencils ready. I think you'll find this to be very important.
Thanks, Chris. I'd like to focus on three primary areas. Talk a little bit first about the benefits of win-loss and how it can benefit your organization. Talk a little bit about the obstacles that we've seen with our clients in the past and give you some ways of helping you in overcoming those obstacles. And then third, talk a little bit about best practices and what our clients are doing that we've found that's been helpful. First, I'd like to, with our win-loss program, we in many ways we're focusing on providing strategic information as well as tactical insight. In our win-loss programs, we're providing individual profiles of each interview that we're completing, of each deal that happened, that will provide insight into what happened within the account, give you some analysis of what we thought of the deal, give you a little bit of an overview of the company. And then also we provide a trend report when we have enough data to be able to aggregate that data and really start to see some signs of what's going on. First, we really want to focus on helping the executive leadership team make strategic decisions for your organization. And one of the ways that we do that is through our predictive model. And in many ways, we want to make recommendations based on derived importance rather than stated importance. In the past, we've made before we had our predictive model, we used to work solely with stated importance, and that can get a little bit dangerous because there's a couple shortcomings with that. One, many times, a respondent may state an attribute as important, but because he thinks or he or she thinks it's accepted as within the industry to place importance on that. Two, many respondents, they can't differentiate the importance of most attributes. Everything's important to them, and it really gets difficult to really have a good understanding of what truly is important. And then third, using stated importance really doesn't provide the ability to predict the increase or decrease of the sales win ratio.
Kind of funny right there, Ralph. I think to bring that to light is we used to ask a question, how important is this on a scale of 1 to 10? And we'd ask that about 20 or 30 different items, and everybody would say everything was important. This is the problem with the stated importance is, how do you differentiate something that's a 9 versus a 10? Nobody will ever tell you that professionalism or features functionality was a 3 or a 4 in the deal, right?
Exactly right. Everything's important. You have everything averaging around 9 points, and then you have nothing to go off of. And so Primary Intelligence has created a proprietary statistical model that uses a little bit of linear regression and that uses the data from the research to come up with the derived importance. And so, Primary Intelligence really takes measurements of all the key influencers that affect the sales outcome, and our analysis is able to determine when superior performance of an influencer has a strong correlation with wins, and when poor performance of an influencer has a strong correlation with losses. And so when we come down to it, Primary Intelligence has the rare ability to pinpoint the influencers that potentially have the greatest impact on improving your company's win ratio. So when you can pinpoint specific criteria that you should focus on, where that will help you win more deals, and then it will come back and tell you how much you can win if you can improve in that area. That becomes very important to our clients.
On the second point, tactical insight. Tell us a little bit about that.
Tactical insight, within the opportunity profiles, it provides a lot of information for the sales reps and the sales managers to be able to have a better understanding of what really went down in the deal. Also, within our trend reports, we provide gap analysis, which will look at the average ratings for our clients versus the average ratings of their competitors. and you can start to see where our clients' strengths and weaknesses are, where their competitors' strengths and weaknesses are, and where the biggest gap is, and where they need to improve in order to compete against X competitor or Y competitor. And it really helps them to make immediate decisions on the areas that they need to improve in.
Well, it's always fun in a win-loss analysis to be able to see what a competitor is doing over and over again to hurt themselves. Not because you want anything bad to happen to other people and companies, but gee, your survival is based on winning business from them. So if you can hand that to your sales reps and say, look, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, straight from the horse's mouth, that's extremely valuable.
Very powerful.
Okay. Let's go ahead and talk about a few very specific benefits.
So, gaining a better understanding of the recent opportunities. In our interviews, typically we're breaking it out into what we call our three drivers. So we really want to understand what's happening within and their perceptions of our client as well as the competition. So the three drivers are company, product and service, and sales team. From a company point of view, we're really looking to try to see what the perception is of their organization, what the company is doing well, where the company could improve. From the product and services, we want to have a better understanding of how their solutions are being perceived, what features they like, what they don't like, what they would like to see. And then from a sales team point of view, we want to see how effective the sales team was versus the competitor's sales team. What they did well, what the best practices were, what they could have improved on. And, that really helps them gain a better understanding of what happened within that deal.
And, it's important when you're doing this type of research to make sure that you focus the respondent back on the time when they were doing the sales evaluation, right?
Right. And anytime that, people always want to complain about current pain points, and so we always have to direct them back to, okay, we understand you're having issues with your implementation now, and we can pass that information along, but we really want to understand what happened during the evaluation period so we can help them to improve in that area.
Fantastic.
The win-loss also provides a better understanding of the competition overall. You can really get a better understanding of your competition's strengths and weaknesses, what their sales approach is, what their offerings look like, maybe potentially some pricing in there. You can really start to get a good warning of competitors that are gaining market share that you may not be aware of. It really helps you understand their strategies and what you need to do in order to compete better.
Okay.
Also important is you're able to discover the best opportunities you have to win in the future. It may have been a close loss for you. It may have been a very disappointing loss, but you may set yourself up better next time you go to bid, especially in industries such as the insurance industry that goes to bid every 2 to 3 years. If you barely lost and now you understand where you lost and what areas you needed that they didn't like, you're able to improve in those areas and you have a much better chance of winning that deal in the future.
But if you can measure it accurately, like you're saying, there's a difference between a loss where you had no chance and a loss where it was just by the skin of your teeth.
Right, and we measure that through what we call our outcome advantage index. So it basically takes the gaps between our client and the competition, and it will come back and give you a score and tell you, okay, is this a strong win or a weak win? Is this a strong loss or a close loss? And so you're able to really have a better understanding of where you have potential opportunity in the future.
Okay.
The opportunity profiles also identify areas for sales effectiveness training. The profiles provide excellent resource for our sales management team to be able to sit down one-on-one with the sales rep to really understand what happened in the deal. In many cases, if it's a win, it's all the the sales rep gets all the credit. If it's a loss, then it's probably because of price. In many cases for wins and losses, it's probably somewhere in between. So you're able to really sit down and based on what's coming back from the feedback, you'll be able to identify areas where you can improve.
Kind of crazy here, but we have some people that are competitive intelligence and marketing people. Is it reasonable to believe that these people can help give this information over to sales so that sales can then have a better window into identifying those areas for sales effectiveness training?
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I think it's very important that we make sure that sales is able to receive this feedback in order for to have a successful program.
Okay.
You're able to discover inaccurate perceptions. Our customers, often find that functionality wasn't demonstrated properly, and a decision not to select them was based on an inaccurate perception.
So give me an example of that, Ralph.
Well, recently there was a client that you found out about approximately 75% of the functionality that respondents said that they didn't have, they actually did have. And if they would have been able to, change that perception, they had a better chance to have that win. There was a disconnect there somewhere when the rep was presenting the offering, and all it took was some more training, and they were able to improve in that area.
So you've got this great big powerful system, what have you. The sales reps are only showing the tip of the iceberg. And if the sales reps aren't talking about it, the prospects figure it must not be there, right?
That's right. And in many cases, the reps may never have known without the advantage of the profiles coming back and helping them to learn that.
Okay, a very powerful benefit of win-loss is not necessarily to beat the sales guys up, but find out what is happening, what's working, what's not working.
Exactly.
Okay. Here's kind of a fun part, I think, is the unexpected benefits. And I love the thought you put into this one, Ralph.
In many cases, the win-loss program, people think, okay, help me to improve to win more deals. And that's very important. But there are some unexpected benefits that come up in some cases that are really helpful. You can really, talking about our outcome advantage index you can really discover how strong your wins really are. It's really a great window into seeing how well you're doing, and to see if you have any retention issues. You can talk about, if you have recent wins that are starting to think about potentially changing vendors due to implementation issues or integration issues, this gives you a warning flag, and you can meet that before it becomes a big issue.
Well, kind of along those lines.
And then on the other side, you can discover relationships with longtime customers may be strained. In many cases, we're doing win-loss interviews with companies that have renewed with our clients. And in some cases, they may have renewed, but they may not have wanted to due to issues that were coming up. And so you can, it's usually very obvious within a profile to be able to see, okay, these guys are having issues, and in many cases, their sales reps were not aware of the issues.
And when you talk about a profile, Ralph, you're talking about the results of an individual interview, right?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
And then it also provides you an opportunity to get to know your customers better, understand what's important to them, who's buying from you. Are they new customers? Are they current customers? What do they want to see in the future? You can really tailor your offerings around what their needs are and what your current customers are doing. And then, one thing that is somewhat surprising to some of our clients is, many times when we're calling up these opportunities, they're very appreciative. They want to provide feedback, and they appreciate the fact that the vendor is trying to improve. Even in a loss situation, they understand that the sales rep put a lot of time and money into trying to win their business, and so they in some ways they feel obligated to participate, and that helps us with getting enough interviews that we need. But it also makes them appreciative and helps them to remember you when they go to bid in the future.
All right. I got to tell you, this last one you put on the page is one of my favorites. I love the golden nuggets.
And from time to time we have what we call golden nuggets. In many cases we're provided with lost sample, and when we call up, we find out that the decision really hasn't been made, or maybe they lost the decision, but they liked our client for another offering. And then it's really exciting when we can provide an email to our clients, providing them with the contact information of the potential customer to be able to help them to win that business. And in many ways, it helps them to get the return on their investment just from some of the deals that we've been able to give to our clients.
And so kind of just to bring some light onto that, I remember we had a network security vendor that did win-loss with us in the past. And in many cases, we would call what they had sent us as losses. And we would call and say, we understand you were evaluating so-and-so, our client, and you chose not to purchase from them. And the person on the phone would say, no, we haven't made our decision, and in fact, they're still in the running. We're waiting for the sales rep to provide us such and such information. As Ralph says, zip that information right straight back to our client, and they closed a good portion of those, to the point that they once said to us, the golden nuggets more than paid for their win-loss program with us, and then the competitive intelligence, the sales information, all of these benefits that Ralph have talked about, those came to them basically free because they were discovering new business through these golden nuggets. Now, one other thing, Ralph, you were talking about, but there was a telecommunications company. This is a fairly unexpected benefit, and it may be a rare case. But tell me a little bit more about what happened in their marketing department.
Sure. We recently had a large customer that had a massive layoff within their marketing department, and unfortunately they laid off a majority of their team. However, the only people in the marketing team that were saved from being laid off were those that were within the win-loss program. Due to the insights that they were getting from the individual profiles, as well as the improvements that they were able to see given that feedback. And so, it basically saved their job and made them, in many ways it makes you look like a champion.
Research that's tied to revenue, it's a pretty strong place to be.
That's right.
Okay, great. I know we're going through a lot of bullet points here. I appreciate everybody paying attention and sticking with us. We will change gears in just a minute, but like I said, in this presentation, we wanted to give as much feedback as possible on how to do win-loss the right way and the best practices we've found out. It's our forum to try to respond to the information or the questions that have been asked us in other webinars. Let's talk about some of the obstacles, Ralph, because win-loss is not necessarily an easy research project to do compared to some others, is it?
No, in fact, in many cases we face some major roadblocks that we have to overcome. And by far the number one roadblock that we have to face is issues that we have in gathering the sample or the contacts that we need to call. I think nearly every client that we've had are relatively surprised at how difficult it is at times to be able to get sample. Not only enough sample to be able to do a project, but also accurate sample. There may be difficulty in acquiring the sample, whether it's from their SFA tool where the sales reps may not be tracking their deals very well, or whether they're calling the sales reps to be able to get those deals. Some of the sales reps are unresponsive or are cherry picking what deals to provide to you. And then it becomes something that will put an immediate stop to a project if we don't have companies to call on. There are also issues with sample accuracy and outdated sample and non-competitive samples. So it's really important to be able to overcome those sample issues, and the main way of doing that is to get buy-in through the sales team.
We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a couple of minutes, but that really is just huge. I mean, I haven't seen a project ever go 100% smoothly on sample.
Right. And another thing is pushback from sales. There's a likelihood that the sales reps will have, a fear of punitive action based on negative feedback from the profiles. And so it really goes back to, addressing that concern and making sure they understand that this is not a program to, rout out the poor performance, but it's a program to help the sales team as a whole improve. And that's really important to help them understand that. And once they start seeing some of the feedback, a lot of those concerns start going away.
Okay.
There's also some confidentiality concerns. Sometimes when we're calling up our contacts, the respondents are unwilling to provide feedback due to confidentiality concerns. And so we can do several things to help set them at ease. But, again, going back to explaining how the feedback will be used, and as the client, you should definitely get permission to use feedback from any of these opportunities, as if you want to use some of their feedback as marketing materials and so forth. You should get permission from them to do that. Also, I want to talk a little bit about unrealistic expectations. Sometimes clients are, they may have 50 deals within a quarter's time, but they want 40 interviews. Primary intelligence may be able to do that, but it may take quite a bit of time. So, we want to make sure that the deal, that we have enough sample to be able to get the project done in a timely manner. And typically, we're looking at a 3-to-1 ratio, just to help us get done in a timely manner. And of course, the larger the deal sizes are, the more likely that they'll be to participate. And so you can take that into consideration as you're trying to figure out how much sample you're going to need.
Okay.
poor communication. There's if the marketing team is taking on the win-loss program, and the sales team is not aware of it, then there's going to be huge issues. So there's poor communication from vendor to customer, as well as poor communication from vendor to sales. So one way, contacts, we're calling up their contacts or their customers, and they're skeptical or angry about where we got their information. And it's helpful to be able to have the sales rep or someone within our client's organization to send out an email or voicemail to let them know what's going on with the program and how it potentially could benefit them, and let them know that there's a third-party organization that's going to be calling you in the next couple of weeks. Please provide them with some information, and then they're expecting the call.
Well, that brings up an interesting topic, though, Ralph, and that is, divulged versus non-divulged. If you're sending out emails and communicating through your sales reps and leaving voicemails saying, we're trying to do this project, will you please participate? Of course, you've taken away the whole idea of an undivulged interview. Do you think you give anything away in that?
No, I think in every win-loss program, I would highly recommend that we're divulging who the client is, primarily because it's really going to help your response rate. Like I said before, people feel obligated to participate, and many of our clients are surprised at the response rates that we're able to get, especially from our losses. People are willing to participate, and they want to give feedback. And then also talking a little poor communication from the vendor to the sales team. So making sure that salespeople are aware of the study and instruct them to help them cooperate as much as possible. And that's also a very important point.
Fantastic. All right. Well, let's talk about the best practices. Those things that are going to make a win-loss program work the best for you. These are taken again from dozens of thousands of interviews and hundreds of our clients. This is what it takes to make sure that you get good results from your win-loss. Ready, Ralph?
I'm ready.
Okay.
So by far the most important thing, and I think it sounds like a broken record here, but making sure you get buy-in from the sales leadership. You could have buy-in from the executive leadership up to the CEO, who may have a mandate. But if you don't have buy-in from the sales leadership, then the program's going to go nowhere. You'll hit roadblocks every time. Talk about some methods for increasing participation. There's a number of methods that you can do, and I've talked a little bit about them. But as a third party, if you are able to acquire a third party organization to do your interviews, they're much more likely to be open and share feedback with you. They're much more likely to participate in many cases. Sending out preparatory emails, prepping the potential interviewee and the sales rep of what's going on, helping to understand, providing a clear understanding of the purpose of the call.
Not to be too much of a commercial, but I do want to just point out here that when it comes to participation rates, we've had a number of clients that have come to us who have had fantastic win-loss programs already in place in their companies that they've been doing in-house. But they come to us because a third party tends to get better response rates from the prospects, the wins and lost opportunities. They see us as a third party, objective, non-biased person that will listen better, and they tend to think that the information that they get is a little bit more valuable. Now, my apologies for the commercial, but it is kind of a reality and a fact of life that, in some cases, a third party will work better for you.
Including an equal representation of wins and losses is key. In many cases, we have clients that they want to learn. They feel like the losses are much more important to be able to learn where they need to improve, and that is true. But I think you can learn a lot more from your wins than you think you can, and that you realize. And there's a couple of reasons for that. It helps you build on strengths. You find best practices. When you aggregate your data, it helps to see how your company as a whole better if you're able to see wins and losses. You start averaging things, and you can see, okay, this is how my company's doing across the board, rather than just within my loss landscape. And then. The wins also provide a better demonstration of flaws in your competition. If it's a loss, they're less likely to talk about problems that they had with the company that they purchased from. They're more likely to talk about flaws within the competition in a win deal.
Okay.
And you'd be surprised, but there's some clients that we have that refuse to deliver the individual profiles to the respective reps who were over that deal, and that's a huge mistake. If the profiles are meant to help the sales reps, the marketing team can definitely learn a lot from it, but ultimately it's the sales rep who's going to need those individual profiles, and it's going to be very important to you that you get those to them in a timely manner.
Okay.
And then, sales rep interview is optional. In many cases we have clients that want to be able to get the point of view from the company as well as the point of view from the sales rep. But what happens when there's discrepancies between what they're saying? It kind of becomes a he said, she said, and ultimately it is the client who knows why they purchased or why they didn't purchase. So, sales rep interviews can be valuable, and we do sales rep interviews. They're valuable if you want to look at it from a 360 point of view, but they're not necessarily required.
Fantastic. Hey, before we go on to the next slide, Ralph, there's a question that's come from the audience based on one of the bullets here, buy-in from sales leadership, and she says, you've stated the need to have sales leadership buy-in. Where do you see the broker community fitting into a win-loss program? In other words, she's in the insurance industry. She wants to do win-loss. How do you get the broker involved? How do you get that buy-in from the brokers?
We have a number of insurance companies that that are our customers, and there are cases where we're interviewing brokers in the employer group. And there's cases where we're just interviewing the brokers. There's cases where we're just interviewing the employer group. But I think the brokers are just as anxious to be able to provide feedback as a sales individual is, as a client is.
Okay.
And so, the response rates within the broker groups are pretty high, typically as well. The only difficult part is when a broker is responsible for multiple deals, and you want to be able to get as many interviews as you can, and they may only be able to provide feedback for one or two deals, and so then that's the only issue that you'll potentially have with that.
Do you know if information is then sent back to the broker in some of these situations?
In some cases, it is, yes.
Okay. All right. And
but you have to be careful with that, of course.
Certainly. But that's a very good question. If somebody else has something specific along those lines, go ahead and type that question to us, or make sure that we give a call afterwards. She asked one more time also, do you recommend letting them know ahead of time of your intention to do a win-loss program?
Most definitely.
I'd say absolutely you have to. They have to be involved from the beginning, just as sales leadership would be. And if you don't have their buy-in, it's not going anywhere.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Let's go ahead and just quickly a couple more best practices.
Also, dissemination of information to a broad audience. It's not just the sales reps that can find value within the win-loss program. It's not just the marketing team. If you're able to distribute some of the key findings to your competitive intelligence department, your marketing, your product development, your sales development, your executive staff. One of our account consultants within Primary Intelligence compares this to the Plains Indians' use of the bison back on the plains. They would use every single part of the bison because it was all valuable to them, down to the tail. Everything was valuable to they could use every single thing about it. And in many cases, you'd be able to break out sections of a profile and provide it to somebody, and it's something they can use in a presentation or something they can use to make a decision, and help them to understand something better. So, making sure that you disseminate that not just through your sales team, but also to everyone within your organization. And one way we don't want to keep the data in one place. In some cases where the profile may just sit on the stakeholder's desk, or it's not being used. That's a problem. And one way one thing we've done to overcome that is we've created a dashboard that that really provides it across the board to help people see information real time, and so you can disseminate that to who you want to.
I think that'll be a good topic for an upcoming webinar, in fact.
That would be a long webinar, in fact, yes.
Okay, go ahead.
And then also conducting a periodic satisfaction survey. Find out what the stakeholders are doing with the information. Find out what they're liking about the program. Find out, ways that questions they potentially would like to ask. When you can come back and say things like 80% of your stakeholders were able to gain specific insight that they didn't know before, and you can share that with your manager, that becomes very powerful. If you're able to come back and say 100% of the people who receive the profiles would recommend a full-scale rollout or renewal of a win-loss program, that becomes very powerful and it helps you. And then finally, tracking changes in your company based on recommendations from your program. Really, it comes down to, okay, once a trend report is completed and we've provided you with recommendations and you have a great understanding of what's going on, what are you going to do about it? What changes are you implementing? What programs are you implementing? And then once you've implemented those programs, what impact did it really have on your sales? And so, you can come back and say, okay, let's track this. Let's implement this program. Let's see what happens now. And then, 6 months later or a year later, you conduct another campaign, a win-loss campaign, and you can really see what happened.
Great. Ralph, I appreciate that very much. Quickly, before I get into the secrets of a successful leveraging of the win-loss program, here's some things you might want to write down as measurements, things you ought to expect. If you're doing it right, you ought to get a 60% plus response rate from both wins and losses. It's very common for them to want to talk to you about the amount of time they invested in the sales process. Respondents will talk to you. You can do a quick 5-minute interview. We've seen interviews from 20 to 30 to 40 minutes, and again, we don't make it common practice. I would hate to take more than 30 minutes out of somebody's schedule, but when you get somebody that wants to talk, we've seen them go hours, in fact. But again, that's not common. Do, however, expect them to talk to you. You should expect information regarding your performance compared with that of the top competitors. In other words, they will tell you what the other competitors did, and most of the time they will identify which competitors you were up against. And then also expect a growing acceptance from sales reps over time. The project gets easier. Don't let initial obstacles get you down. Really quickly, I want to understand, as we go into the last few minutes of the webinar, what would you consider to be the biggest value of win-loss? If you just take a second, reach up, vote on the screen. We'll leave this open a short time. But Ralph, I think that the best practices you talk about making sure that sales get, even though sales doesn't run these programs all the time, if we're in marketing or competitive intelligence or a market analyst, you have to have the sales people on board, because otherwise it's a scary witch hunt to them.
That's right.
Okay. In fact, we've got a question here asked, says, disseminating the information as you were talking, does this ever make anybody uncomfortable?
At times it can be, and you have to be sensitive to that. I mean, we've had some clients who will scrub the profiles of the sales reps' names to keep the innocent. They don't want to make anybody upset or get anybody in trouble. So there's ways that you can get around that.
Last couple of seconds to vote, if you will, and then we'll move on to the secrets of the leveraging the information. Go ahead and close that poll. The results are: most people want to help sales sell more effectively. A noble cause, I think. Appreciate the salespeople all around the world are right now standing up and applauding you. Okay, tracking competitive intelligence, discovering competitor sales and marketing tactics, and those three things are just smack dab in the middle of what you should expect from a good win-loss program. If you're doing it right, that should be your results. If you're not getting those results, you need to rethink what you're doing in your win-loss program. Okay. Again, if you have questions and answers, we appreciate you chiming in with your thoughts. I'm going to go ahead and move us forward to the secrets, and we're going to start with secret number 1. Secret number 1, and boy, this is really broken record time, but sales and marketing have got to work together to make this happen. Sometimes a win-loss program is run from the sales side. Most of the time, in our experience, it seems to come from the marketing side. Either way, you got to get sales and marketing working together. This is some funny kind of myopic vision that happens at times. I'm surprised sometimes at the sales leaders that will say, we're doing win-loss, and when I ask them if they're sharing that with the marketing department, they say, well, what could marketing possibly get out of this? Well, you'd be surprised. And that surprises me when they say that. But the one that really stuns me is when the marketing department does win-loss, and then they say to me, why would I share this with sales? What could they possibly get out of that? And that happens more than often than you'd ever know. You have to make sure that both of you are working together to get maximum benefit out of this. Number 2, executive sponsorship. If you do win-loss in a little foreign corner of your company, maybe it's answering 1 or 2 questions for the company, it's going to have about as much value as you could expect if it's compartmentalized. But you really need to find executive sponsors who will help to make the information visible and also have a commitment to at least considering the information and acting upon it if it helps them in their objectives. Boy, you know, if you don't have anybody that can make business change, then maybe your win-loss program really, well, actually, let's not just single out win-loss. What's the customer sat data going to do? You know, what's the client loyalty going to do? What's the competitive intelligence going to do in general? If nobody listens to it and nobody cares, it's not going to make a difference in your company. Number 3, work together. It's not just about sales and marketing. In fact, this was a topic of a webinar that we conducted back in September. And the idea is, you know, as Ralph talked about this example of the bison and every bit being useful, there are so many tidbits. This intelligence is based on your clients telling you how hard it is to do business with you, how easy it is to buy from you, why they think you're better than the competition, what it is they expect out of your product, and so forth. There are pieces that apply to sales and marketing and customer service and C-level and the legal group and contracts and pricing. You've got to be able to get representatives from each of these groups. I mean, if you are looking to leverage this data as far and wide as possible, I've seen such things as steering committees and other sales intelligence groups where a member from each of these organizations comes, sits down with the data, creates takeaways, goals, goes back to their group, and makes changes in each of their groups to help make the process of being a good vendor actually happen. A very, very important idea, and this is probably the crux of everything that is successful in many of the organizations that we've looked at. Someone in the organization has to be able to turn it into intelligence. Now, we at Primary Intelligence believe that the information we provide is very valuable, and I believe it is because we have a lot of clients that keep coming back to us. If it didn't have value, Ralph, don't think they would keep coming back. But the main point of this is somebody there has to be able to speak sales, somebody has to speak marketing, somebody has to be able to interpret the findings of the intelligence and meld it with the corporate culture to understand what's really happening and what are these things saying. And that's sometimes a weakness that a third party doesn't have.
Who do you think would be good at doing that?
I'm really glad you asked that. For the most part, I've seen that title be sales operations or sales training. If you have somebody in those organizations that buys into the win-loss, you have a very good opportunity of making sure that change happens and that the information gets spread out and disseminated. One of the people that I talked to, she described how she sits down with a profile, schedules a meeting with the regional sales manager and the individual sales rep, goes through it, and tries to provide context to make sure that everybody understands this is what they're saying, this is what you ought to be taking from this, and this is where we as a company can make changes to be more effective.
It's probably important to have someone that has influence within different departments and you know, cross departments.
And I'm certainly not saying that this person can't live in competitive intelligence or in marketing. In fact, it does happen. But for the most part, the majority of those who make the biggest difference, they live in that world of sales operations or sales training. They may not necessarily be sales reps, but they're not completely marketing either. They kind of bridge that gap right there.
Well, and if you have someone else that's doing multiple tasks other than just win-loss, you know, sometimes win-loss may be pushed to the side, and you know, then you know, you're not able to really capitalize on the information that's coming back to you.
Okay. Number 5, protect the innocent. I think Ralph made a good point of this, and I'd like to reemphasize it. Okay, you're only going to interview a few opportunities for any given sales rep. You might not interview any for some, and some of them might only get one shot. You got to make sure that one-off mistakes are not publicly announced, And also sanitizing a profile so they don't know who the company was or who the sales rep was. If there's information in there that can be learned, make sure that it doesn't hurt anybody in the process.
And we have a Fortune 500 company that uses scrub profiles to send throughout their reseller network. And so there's thousands of people that are seeing these profiles, but they've been scrubbed, so they don't know who it is for, but they're still able to capitalize on some of the feedback that's provided to them.
This is a good point also to point out that your sales operations person is a person who can provide some context also. It's very important to remind management, especially the C-levels or those that are a little detached from the day-to-day. If they see one profile go through, there is a tendency to want to overact. Who was this? What did they do? And get this person out of here. You have to have somebody that can make sure that they cool them down and say, look, this was a one-time thing. We know this person has a great track record. Let's not take one profile too seriously. Okay. Number 6, those that are doing a good job are incorporating their win-loss into their voice of the customer programs. They have customer satisfaction, client loyalty, or some other type of program running. They are working very hard to make sure that they are listening to the customer and incorporating that data into their business practice. This is some fantastic feedback. Win-loss brings you feedback right at the beginning of the client experience when they're brand new and they haven't already started to get, if you will, acclimatized to what your company does. Very powerful feedback. Secret number 7, something is much greater than nothing. Even if you can't incorporate all the best practices we've talked about today, even if you can't afford a third-party vendor, even if you can't get a consultant to come in and teach you how to do this right, start doing something. Anything is better than nothing because you'll start to A, get information, B, have something in hand to show around, C, get sponsorship. It's a lot easier to go around with a report getting people's attention than it is to talk about a concept. Now, as we wrap up, I'd like to talk to you about the results of win-loss. And this was a quote from one of our companies. I've used it before, but I love this quote. This comes from a healthcare industry where contracts are churning regularly. This is a client of ours who used win-loss. They looked at 60 total opportunities, 30 wins and 30 losses. At the end of the day, they went back into the losses, created a strategic plan on each of the losses for the next year, and they said we won back 7 of the 30 losses of the previous year. That's 23% of the lost business coming back to them. It took very little effort to get those companies to come back to them. They had the truth that they needed to be able to show why they were the best choice after all. That's a huge increase in revenues for this company. And this is a national healthcare provider. On a national scale, if you could win back 23% of your losses, that's possibly millions or billions of dollars of revenue that your company is not experiencing right now. I guarantee those kinds of results, preach to somebody in the C-level office, get somebody's attention. And maybe that's not why you're in it. Maybe you enjoy what you're doing. Maybe I'm making too much of the revenue idea and being the company hero. But if you're the kind of person that likes to make a difference as opposed to be a report passer, win-loss is an excellent tool to make that a reality. A couple of last housekeeping items I'm going to go through quickly here, and then we've got a couple of questions I'd like to make sure that we answer before the webinar finishes. Again, if you want to go ahead and submit a question, Ralph is waiting here, ready to take your calls. Love to have a little bit of spontaneous conversation. Finally, contact information for both of us. If you didn't get your questions answered in this, we're here for you. Give us a call, send us an email. We're happy to talk to you. Ralph, I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule, and it's been a lot of work to prepare this webinar, but to me this has been a fantastic thing, and I hope that our guests have been able to benefit from this.
I hope they will too.
Just quickly, let's go ahead and look for a couple of questions. We have a question that says, procurement executives and managers are sometimes less willing to participate in a win-loss effort. Any suggestions for increasing their participation? And I'm trying to understand, maybe are they talking about the procurement managers at their prospects company? I have to believe that's what she's trying to ask here.
There's a number of things. Potentially you could provide them with a financial incentive if you feel like that's necessary, and you know, also you could potentially offer a white paper where they can see some of the key results that may be of interest to them, maybe a little bit more incentive. Give them a little bit of some of the key findings and help them to understand what you're able to come up with. So there's a couple of things that you could potentially do to help get into people that are typically difficult to speak with.
And sometimes I wonder, is it the procurement people that are the ones making the decision, or are they the ones that are in charge of the buying process? Is it somebody that's told them to go and buy this, and those people have some influence? Maybe there are other people inside the company that have more influence over the buying process than just the procurement agents. I don't know.
Yeah, and we're always trying to find out who the primary decision maker really was. Even when the contact information is given to us, we'll call up, find out that they had some influence, but the key decision maker was John Smith, so we'll call him and try to set a schedule with him instead.
One other thing that might be good there is to make a very quick survey, something by email that they can complete over the web in 5 minutes or so. I don't know exactly why the procurement managers would be less likely to talk, other than maybe they just get bored of talking about their decisions. But if you can make it an easy, palatable thing that they can respond to quickly, and then maybe do some follow-up by phone later, that might work out also. Another question that's here that I think I'd like to address really quickly, Ralph, is the thought about wins versus losses. Let's talk about some of the benefits that you can get by interviewing wins and making sure they're part of your program. You already addressed that as one of your bullet points, but what are some things that I'll tell you this is kind of a funny story. We had one client, and I think in our history it's been one client only, who wanted to do wins only. A lot of our clients will come and say, should we do losses only or a combination? We always guide them to do this combination. But this one who wanted to do wins, their reason for doing this was, we don't want to find out how not to sell anymore. We want to find out what's working for us. And truly, I think that's an important point. Your wins are going to show you how to be successful.
Yeah, and I think overall, it's just the most important thing is you want to have a better picture of your competitive landscape, and so I think you're able to do that better when you have wins and losses.
Something I think you were mentioning to me another time, and I think it's worth mentioning on that topic is, in your wins, that's when your competitors lose. You can see when they trip up and what it is that they're not doing right.
That's
Again,
right.
If you're looking, you won't find that in the losses because that's where your competitors are at their best.
That's correct.
Okay. I think that's it right now. I'm right up against the hour. Boy, what a great audience. We appreciate your participation. Hope to be able to have an opportunity to speak with you personally. If you have questions about setting up your own program inside, or trying to evaluate a third-party vendor, or if you're just looking for a way to try to get support from your executive leadership or your marketing management, sales management, what have you, to start a win-loss program, we're here to talk to you. It doesn't have to be on a paying basis. Let's at least chat, give you some ideas. Let's be your advocate so you can get this type of thing working in your company too. And again, we appreciate your feedback as you exit the webinar. We appreciate your follow-up information. Anything else we can do to be of service, we're here for you. This will conclude our webinar today. Thank you very much.